The widow has struck again. And yes, certainly she is not wasting any time. Will you come with me to examine the body? Right now, if possible. But let me warn you, there's a lot to take in. I performed hundreds of autopsies on brutalized bodies. Detective, I'll be fine. Dr. Israel is paying gravediggers to bring her bodies. She says this one's nearly 8 days old, but I guess I will make it work. She looks at the gravedigger. You bring me any more like this, I will not accept delivery. She takes the scalpel and she cuts out the heart and she grabs it and throws it on a tray. She hooks up some electricity to the heart and the heart starts beating, and Israel is in awe. She removes the electricity from the heart, and the heart still beats, but it comes to a slowly stop. Damn it! Cut! Opening credit scene! Boo! The detective Kenneth is now the superintendent, and he's trying to get into Solomon's room. So he summons the barkeeper, and as they're trying to get in, the fucking door finally opens up, and Solomon's hanging up dead. And with both of his arms cut off and one of his leg is missing, Mr. Garvey now wakes up Verdi. Good morning. Trust you slept well. I slept like I hadn't had a care in the world. No doubt of having a refined young lady such as yourself in the house. Did you notice the gown on the chair? I bought it for you. No, it's a gift, my dear, a token of my esteem. Please don't deny me this happiness. It's lovely, thank you. You will look exquisite, and Gladys can do any necessary alterations. If there's something not to your liking, but there won't be. I have an eye for figures, yours especially. When will I be going home? Are you not happy here? Is there something you lack? I want nothing truly. I draw such comfort from my father's Bible. It helps me strengthens my resolve to remain a good, honorable girl. Breakfast is in exactly 10 minutes. Don't be late. Wear the dress. George Rondon now goes to Mrs. Sincone's house, and he says that you're the only person that can aid me. I just lost my beloved friend Terrence, and I am not myself. Oh, Mr. Rondon. And then the pastor says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be conformed. Let God be your refuge and your strength. Please take a seat, Mr. Rondon. Thank you. There has been so much death. Too much. I come here, my dearest lady, because you are my last chance to make things right with the spirit world before I leave town. I would forever be in your debt. If you would just use your formidable talents to reach Terrence beyond the veil of death. That is preposterous request, the pastor says. This is my curse. You mean against God? Mrs. Simcone, you know the pain of losing someone you love. With my heart, I would not ask if there was any other way. The pastor says, an unnatural request born of unnatural feelings. Pastor, that is enough, Mrs. Simcone says. The connection I made with Alistair was entirely unexpected. I'm not even sure I'm able to reach the spirit world again. I'm here. I will guide you, George Rondon says. She looks up at the pastor and George and says, I will do it. I feel I must. Only on one condition, is that the pastor may attend the seance. To protect my soul from damnation. The pastor looks up and says, of course. Mr. Garvey now goes to Viviana and Venita's house. Where's Verdi? Is something wrong? Not at all. I've come for her things. But Verdi's on loan to you. The arrangement has changed. That's not proper or acceptable. And as her beloved family, we do not contest. And as she hands over Verdi's bag, he takes the Bible from her hands. Verdi came here with nothing. Well, those days have changed for her, and by the looks of things, just the beginning of you. I must say, Mr. Garvey, if I have known our sister would have provide so much joy and pleasure, I would have asked for more. Goodbye, Mrs. Botticelli. If you're changing the terms of our deal, if you're going to keep Verdi, then we require a new financial agreement. Basil looks at her with a nod and walks off right past Viviana and straight out the front door. Viviana walks up to her sister Venita and says, I will arrange her head clear off her neck if I ever lay eyes on our sister again. The detective Kenneth now goes to the morgue. I became rather concerned when I couldn't find you at your home. Have you been here all night? Mm-hmm. Can anyone confirm that? If necessary, why? The widow has struck again. Well, she certainly isn't wasting any time. No, she is not, and I was hoping you can come with me to examine the victim's body. Now, if possible. And she looks over and she's got that dead body from the graveyard digger with the heart there covered up. Of course, I will. He says, I warn you, it's a lot to take in. I performed autopsies on hundreds of brutally dead bodies before, detective. I think I'll be fine. And now we go to the seance scene where George is telling Regina, I brought this to help you to make contact with Terrence. It had great meaning in his life, and his energy still resides within it. He hands the clock over to her, and he says, find the place that keeps the living from the spirit world. I call upon the spirits of Isis, the Wendigo, Laura, Mazda, all beneficiary immortals, and the peaceful deities of the Terma. Allow Terrence Crenshaw to come and speak with us now. What are your senses telling you? So much pain. What else? Where am I? I don't know where I am. She's no longer Mrs. Simcone any longer. Oh, Spirit, speed through eternal darkness beyond the gates of the sun and reveal yourself in this humble vessel. I am here. We're here. Why do you raise me? I am gone. To tell you, I wish we had more time to discover what might have been. I wanted to say my proper goodbye before the ford of bitter waters of the river Styx. Before I flee, where will you flee? Where will you flee? Anywhere but here. I'm a hunted man. Darkness will follow. She will follow no matter where you go. She's. Now this unholy insanity stops right now. Do not run. God light shines upon us. God loves. George St. Terrence, do you hear me? And now back at Simone's body, the detective says, so the wounds, they were done by an assailant who was left-handed. which is consistent with all the other previous widow attacks. Israel says, but the brutality of the amputations and the opening of the chest cavity and the cuts along the ribs appear ragged and messy, like the killer was rushed. Well, I was outside the door, likely while the widow was doing this. Well, then how did she escape? Presumably, I was with the bar, summoning the barkeep to unlock the door. Nevertheless, she had enough time to inflict a lot of mayhem. And while she was staying clear of major organs and arteries, there's got to be a reason to this, right? Yeah, to prolong Solomon's pain. How could anyone possibly endure right here, morphine, cocaine, and heroin shots in the neck could keep him from going into shock? You and Salomon were close, weren't you? Yeah, we were friends. The widow wanted Salomon to feel every cut, experience the cruel sensation as she mutilated him, disturbing him. He was alive through it all until I can't die like this, and I won't. I'd rather spend the rest of my days in jail than suffer like Solomon did. Is there something that you want to tell me? The detective says. The widow, in her notes, said that we needed to confess. So I do. I confess my role in Basil Garvey's role to the great George Rondon's role in a murder of whom? Margaret Mahar. And now all three of them are in jail cells. And Basil says to George, if you're a musician, prove yourself out of here. Be my guest. Otherwise, sit the fuck down. You're getting on my nerves. There's no point. Darkness will follow. Darkness is already here. The good doctor opened her big mouth. And now that witless copper thinks one of us is the widow. It's obviously not me, Israel says. It's not as obvious as it may seem. And then George says, yes, don't you always make a habit to carve up people for a show? You know, George, when we get out of here, I'm going to find a way to personally thank you for doing me such a great fucking favor. And I don't need a disguise to put somebody in the ground. Oh no, you have constant streams of threats. And if any lady dot protests too much, Merkins, I am not the widow, you stick, Wagner. Israel says if anyone is the widow, is the great George Rondon, master of disguises. And then now the detective takes them one-on-one for questioning. Basil says, Margaret Mahar? Doesn't ring a bell. Well, that's interesting because your newspaper had a field day with her story 12 years ago. Oh, right. Oh, right, that harlot got herself all chopped up and down in the devil's elbow. She's a maid, not a prostitute. A hideous act. A pastor, I think. Yes. Andrew May Sr., his son, still continues his glory work today. If I would have to say, wouldn't you know? What can you tell me about her murder? Wouldn't your time be better spent solving the half a dozen murders plaguing the devil's elbow rather than something from a fucking decade ago? You see, I believe they are connected. And so does Dr. Israel. I told you I do not know shit about her murder. I barely remember the woman. She was a domestic servant under the employ of the Botticelli sisters. They threw a party a week before. I was at that party, yes, I do remember. But I don't remember every wench who serves me food or drink amongst the many parties that I've been to over the years. Now that would be absurd. George says, of course I remember Margaret. And if Basil doesn't think he does, he's lethargic. Are you suggesting he doesn't then? Then what? He's lying? That night at the party, held in my honor to celebrate my world tour, Basil asked me to put a spell. A spell? He wanted Margaret to be publicly humiliated. Basil says that lying prick, it was all George. He wanted to use her to show off his new mind control trick. Well, all of a sudden you remember her very well. I remember her because it was in such poor taste, but nobody ever died from embarrassment. George says Basil is obsessed with Margaret. Obsessed enough to kill her? Well, I don't know how it played out, but it played out. I was in Montreal when she cast off her mortal coil. Now the detective is asking Basil, did you kill Margaret Mahar? No. Both Israel and George Rondon has accused you. I am sure they have, because they are desperate. They can't accuse me until the crows come home. I had nothing to do with that unfortunate woman's death. But aren't you missing the obvious point here once again? Maybe the one killer everybody is certain is that holy man seeking revenge for his father's death. Now, either charge me for murder based on evidence that you have, or let me go. The detective and Israel are talking, and he's saying, Doctor, your testimony is all I have. She says, the widow may spare my life, but he won't. Mrs. Sincone walks in all of a sudden with blood dripping off of her hands. Pastor May has been stabbed. We need your help. Dr. Israel, he's been stabbed in the stomach. If he's been stabbed in the stomach, this could be very bad. You need to release her now, please. Mrs. Simcone, I just can't. This is life or death. She is the best surgeon in the entire city. Please let me go and help him. Let me do something right once. And now, 12 years ago, Basil walks into George's theater and he's offering him a gift because the tickets have sold very well. And George says, yes, I know my shows sell out from San Francisco to Marquette. And he says, if I didn't already know that. But, anyways, at that parlor, the trick that you did, messing with people's brains. And George says, yeah, it's not that crude. You make them think things, do things like that made Margaret the other night. Yeah, it's called hypnosis. Yes, yes. Whatever. Hypnosis. Can you hypnotize Margaret again? This time, I want it to be permanent. Is that something you can do? Well, what depends? What exactly do you want done? If you just want to sleep with her, well, it would be easier if we just make you a tonic. She won't remember anything you do, guaranteed. No, no, nothing like that. I just want to wipe something from her mind. Something? What thing? Can you do it or not? Well, there is something I can try. I've been wanting to try. For the price, of course. Money is no object, make it work. But it requires taking her to the brink of death, inside, and then back again. She may not survive. Are you willing to take that chance? I'm afraid it's her only option. Now back with the Dr. Israel. She is operating on the pastor. The widow shows up, and Israel is pleading with her. If I don't get him a transfusion and sew him back up, he will die. No, please, please, I beg you. He's innocent. He's done nothing wrong. Let me finish, then you can do whatever it is you came here to do. And as she does the blood transfusion, she says, I turned myself into the police for what I did to Margaret Mahar. And on the way, or the other, I will face the consequences of my actions, and my testimony will make sure that those directly responsible for Margaret's death is hanged for it. All right, there, I'm done. And she turns around, and the widow is gone. The pastor is going to live, but Israel needs to stay with him. And the detective says, and I hate to remind you of this, doctor, but the widow is stalking everyone involved in Margaret Mahar's death. Well, she paid me a visit while I was operating. Wait, what? What, she was here with you? What'd she do? She watched me operate, and then she left me unmolested. The widow doesn't want me, Superintendent. How could you possibly know that? I know that because though I disrespected Margaret Mahar's corpse, I am not the one who killed her 12 years ago. I seen Margaret at the Botticelli's, but once she was dead, Margaret became much more interesting. She was a flesh specimen, not a rotting corpse, not old or decrepit. She was young, and I wanted to learn everything I could about human bodies. I wanted to see all the things I never been able to properly explored in school on corpses I could never afford to buy. I wanted to see organs and systems and ligaments. Her death was a gift to me. She was mine to unwrap. I learned things that made me a better doctor, but they didn't make me a better human being. I left her body in a public place as demanded by Basil, where it could be discovered. Her death had to look violent and ugly. It had to entice the public to demand justice. Justice that would end up in the swinging of an innocent man. I will do as you ask. I will testify in the highest court of the land that Basil Garvey ordered the death of Margaret. It's my duty, one I should have performed years ago. I'll assign the details and the guard for you. That's not necessary. It's to keep the widow out and you in. Basil is talking with George Rondon back in the jail cells. All our fighting proves is that you're just as much as a bastard as I am. George, we have to team up if we're going to survive the widow. We have to be smart. We have to be prepared. You could start by fucking untying me first. Tell me something, my old friend. How do you prepare to fight a ghost? What the hell are you talking about? And all of a sudden, the superintendent walks in and opens the cell to George and says, you're free to go, but do not leave town. Basil says, "It's about goddamn time. Now open up the goddamn door." "I think not," the superintendent says. "What'd you say?" "Well, you're a risk for certain to flee." "I'm a risk, and you're gonna keep me in here?" "And you will stay in here at the best interest of the public while I compile a case against you, one that will see you hanged." "This is now personal," Basil says. "It's just my job." No, no, I mean for me. Now this is personal for me. Your threats may have worked against Superintendent Kaczynski. Money, that ego-stroking working Kaczynski. But you won't be satisfied until I destroy you. Or until you destroy yourself. Because when word gets out that you've been wasting time whacking off to a 12-year-old murder case while two likely suspects walk free and the widow strikes again, you're fucked. And now the widow shows up to where Israel's at, and she goes and creeps behind her and jabs her neck with a needle. Israel wakes up on the operation table with a bunch of rods poked in through her body and a bunch of wires hooked up to it. The widow slowly comes around as Israel looks at her arms and tries to pull her arm up, and it just falls off to the ground. And then the widow turns on the electricity, and Israel is electrocuted. Cut, credit, scene. All right, man, that was the end of chapter 6, episode 6 of Slasher the Ripper, exclusively on Shudder and AMC Plus. And let's talk about the story real quick. Some final thoughts on episode 6 and maybe the whole story up to now. I do believe we only have 2 more episodes left, 2 more chapters to finish this story out. And the story is progressing quite well. From the very beginning of Horatio getting killed, Allison Sincone getting killed, one of them got decapitated, and then, the Edith getting crushed, to Eddie just being brutally killed with the hammer, all the way to Solomon getting killed and being kept alive while he was killed, so he would feel all the pain that the widow can make one person feel. And that's made Israel not to want to die like that. She wanted to stay in prison for the rest of her life. She didn't want to go out like that. But what happens at the end? The widow did get her, and fucking how she died was absolutely fucking crazy. I mean, imagine waking up and like all your limbs are about ready to fucking fall off if you move them. And once you start to move them, it just rips off and the skin just rips and blood just gushing out. Fucking absolutely crazy. But yeah, I mean, where are they going to go with it? We do have a few more characters left. And what George did say about, how can you fight a ghost? Got me kind of thinking too, with the seances and everything, is it a ghost? Is it a supernatural killer? It could be Mrs. Sincone. What if it's her that's doing this? Found out about Alistair and then fucking killed him. And just wants to kill everybody that what happened to Margaret that night. So we got the story where the party was at the Botticelli sisters' houses or their house, and when Israel was there. So George had to have done another trick on her. We don't know what's happened. Maybe in the next episode, because when Basil asks him to do a hypnotize on her, mind control, and make it permanent, and he's like, well, it might take her to the brink of death. So maybe George was going to do this hypnotize, and and then she died. She didn't make it out. And then so then they had to dispose of the body, and Israel was a doctor, and so she was able to learn from the specimen of Margaret. But how she just, mutilated the body and then left it out in the public for embarrassment was, while the widow wanted to kill her. So all these people in this party that did something, and I know we're gonna find out here in the next episode what exactly they did. Um, I do love it. I love the show. I'm still holding a 9 out of 10 on it. Um, because every time I watch the episode, I'm like, all right, this is all right. It's all right. I'm like, then it just builds up. The episode is like a boiling point, and then it just fucking overflows by the end of it. That's how good it gets. You're just fucking on a rush ride, man. I love it. So thank you all for joining me in the Haunted Basement Studio. And this will all be formed in one long episode on the podcast. So right now, Hardcore Spoiler Movie Reviews podcast. You can watch the video version of this on there, and you can also watch it on YouTube. So thank you all, motherfuckers, for joining me again today. Triple B's is out. Ha ha.